Aloha, my name is Pete Salas. I'm the head instructor of Sweet Pete's Martial Arts Academy. And first of all, I want to say thank you. I am honored and privileged to be a part of your Asian Love Project. I want to start by saying hello to all the students at High Tech Elementary. It's great to be with you today. A special shout out to Miss Latanya for putting this together. I really appreciate that. And also, want to say thank you for letting me be a part of so many of your projects and performances in the past. I've got a chance to work with Miss Latanya many times, and it's always been a lot of fun. It's given me the chance to meet a lot of students from High Tech Elementary, so I'm thankful for that. Anyways, to show love towards any culture from any country, it kind of helps to know a little bit about the history of that culture. And the culture usually includes things like past history, art, music, literature, food, things like that. And the martial arts also has a culture and a history. And today, I'd like to share some of that with you. So come along with me and we'll take that little journey together. We are here in my martial arts school here in Chula Vista. We teach a style that's called Kenpo, which has its roots in Hawaii, which is also where I am from. Now, our art was influenced by three places: China, in an art called Kung Fu, that had something to do with our style; Eskrima, which is from the Philippines, and that had some influence on what we do also; and lastly, I mentioned Hawaii. So, let me share a little bit about what we do and where it came from. If we go back to China, and we go back to Kung Fu, legend has it that China had its start when people would watch animals fight and battle with each other. And they would mimic some of those movements. Like, for example, the tiger and some of the movements of the tiger. The crane, some of the movements and the balance techniques of the crane. There was definitely things like the eagle in some of the strikes that they did. So it's said that men would watch the way these animals fought, imitate some of their movements, and then turn them into fighting techniques that they could use. Now, Kung Fu made its way to Hawaii, and in Hawaii, it went through some modifications to fit the times and the situation that was going on. So, a little interesting fact about Kenpo when it got to Hawaii. There was a time where martial arts was outlawed and was not allowed to be practiced. So what would happen in Hawaii is the native Hawaiian people would practice it by disguising their movements in dance form. Now, you've all heard of hula dancing, right? But the hula that you're used to seeing the ladies do, which is beautiful and graceful, is somewhat modern. It came along a little bit later. Originally, hula was done by the warriors. And the movements in the dances with the feet and the hands were ways of disguising the fact that they were practicing their martial art, but they didn't want the royalty to know what they were doing. So some of those movements were done so they could practice fighting without people knowing they were practicing fighting. And then later on, those movements were combined with certain hand movements that became fighting techniques. You see, it went from dance to fighting. So Kenpo now is known as an art with very quick hand movements, angular foot movements, and then quick devastating strikes. So my friend Bob here, a Kenpo technique kind of looks like very quick strikes, and the techniques, if you see some of the foot movement, you see some of the quick hand strikes, and that's kind of what Kenpo looks like. Here's a couple of typical techniques that come from Kenpo. A guy throws a punch at you, and you kind of see those kind of moves, right? Or you might see a guy push, and we block, and then you see those kind of movements, right? So this is typical of the Kenpo system. Quick, fast strikes that are meant to do damage really, really quickly. But again, remember, only done to protect oneself against an opponent that's being aggressive. Not meant to destroy people that are innocent. So that's a little bit of the history behind Kung Fu, the animal movements, and then Kenpo, which started out as a disguised dance and then was made into a battle form. Now, We also practice an art called eskrima, which is from the Philippines. So you're getting a chance to see a little bit of the history from 3 different places, right? Now in the Philippines, martial arts also was outlawed and was not allowed to be practiced in public. So it was also disguised in dance form, very similar to the dance forms from hula, but a little bit different flavor from the Philippines. Now, I'll share this other interesting fact with you. Not only was martial arts outlawed, but weapons were outlawed. You could not own like a sword, or definitely no firearms or anything like that. So what a lot of the native Filipinos did is they took ordinary tools that they had around their house. This is what's known as a garrote, but as you can see, it's really a stick. So the Filipinos would take their ordinary house items and start practicing movements with their weapon. And they would put it into dance form, and then they started to turn it into fighting techniques. All right? Now, this was a very common farm tool in the Philippines, known as a bolo knife. In America, it's sometimes called a machete, but this was meant to be a farming implement. So the Filipinos would take their farm tool and basically learn how to battle with it. And they started to practice. So you notice when you see the art practice, it almost looks like a dance, doesn't it? You can see the rhythm and the fluidity and the movements that look kind of dance-like, but actually are used to practice fighting. Now, here's something that you probably are somewhat familiar with, but you may not know that the Nunchaku, or the nunchucks, actually come from the Philippines. And this was a farm tool. It was actually used to thrash things like stalks of bamboo or wheat or things like that, and this was used to help them harvest it. And again, what the natives would do is they took their ordinary farm tool and they pretty much started to learn how to use it in fighting. So these are movements that you've probably seen people do with their nunchucks and turn them into fighting. So these movements that were once used to on a farm were now turned into fighting movements. So basically, because of necessity and need, some of these things became part of the martial arts. So this is a little bit of the culture behind what we do, and just a really short glimpse into what our art looks like. And it's a really, really interesting history. So I want to thank you, first of all, for letting me do this and letting me kind of share that with you a little bit, because here at our school, we like to teach the culture and the history, probably for the same reason you guys are studying it, because it helps us to appreciate where this came from, and it also helps us to honor it. So we don't just look at it as something we use to destroy people or to beat people up or anything like that, but it's used to preserve, number one, people's lives, to help save people's lives, and number two, to help pass on the culture and the history of what we do to children like yourselves that learn it, so that when they grow older and they teach it, hopefully they'll pass it on, and it'll teach people to appreciate where this art came from and what went into making it into what it was, which is really similar to what you guys are doing by your project, by learning to appreciate the culture of different people and different races. We learn to honor them, and we learn to spread a little bit of love to them. So anyways, I want to say thank you for letting me be part of this with you. I really love what you guys are doing. I'm going to come up to my camera so I can turn it off, but as I do, I want to say, High Tech Elementary, you guys are doing a great job. Miss Latanya, thank you so much for letting me be part of this. I will see you hopefully in the very near future. Aloha.